My younger sister is in a relationship with my childhood friend Ethan. She told Ethan that I bullied her at school. That day after class, Ethan brought people and blocked me at the alley entrance. His tone was indifferent. You should also learn a lesson. While struggling, I hit my head and accidentally lost my memory. When I woke up again, a strange man was sitting by my bedside. Don't you remember me? He gave a refined smile and put his hand on my lips. Didn't you say you like your elder brother the most? Why are you looking at me with such a strange look? I was dragged all the way to the open space behind the library. There were 7 or 8 people standing in front. Ethan was at the head. The person I have had a crush on for many years. What do you want? I looked at him calmly. Luna. Ethan tilted his head and lit a cigarette. Arya is your younger sister, your own younger sister. How could you bully her? I twitched my lips. You believe her just because she said so? Ethan raised his eyes. Our eyes met, and suddenly he raised his hand and grabbed my neck. With one hand, he pressed me against the wall behind. Could it be that she slapped herself a few times? What are you still being stubborn for? He had a cigarette in his mouth, and his words were indistinct. But even so, I could clearly feel his uncontrollable anger. Ethan, are you here to seek justice for her now? Ethan suddenly let go. My girlfriend has been bullied. Can't I vent my anger for her? Several girls standing nearby came forward and held me down. One of them raised her hand and slapped me. I couldn't move at all and could only let them do as they pleased. Ethan looked at me indifferently and condescendingly. Luna, you should also learn a lesson. I shouted at him in despair. Ethan, you have known me for so many years. Have I ever bullied others? The boy remained unmoved. He just casually tapped the ash off his cigarette. Arya said that it's because the school gave the last piano competition quota to her last time, and you are dissatisfied. After saying that, he sneered again. I can't not believe my girlfriend's words. There is no point in refuting anymore. In Ethan's view, I am just making futile excuses. Slap after slap came down. I just bit my teeth and remained silent. Stop. The hands holding me down lost strength and left. Ethan approached and brushed the hair off my face. Luna, you weren't like this before. Can you be more obedient in the future? The boy's eyes were gloomy. I really hate the way you resist me. Ethan wasn't like this before. Although he was carefree, he was very good to me. In front of my younger sister Arya, he also had an indifferent look. It seemed to be that day. After I had a quarrel and a cold war with Ethan, he changed. Why did you come back so late? Who did you go out with? Ethan was standing downstairs in my dormitory and seemed to have been waiting for a long time. It's a club dinner. There are many people. He smirked. Why is it that every time after the dinner, it's always the senior who sends you back? His interrogating tone was somewhat harsh. Ethan, can't you stop being like this every time? What on earth are you lost in wild and fanciful thoughts? As long as I have more frequent interactions with a certain boy, Ethan always has a sullen face and interrogates me like interrogating a criminal. He stared at me silently for 2 seconds, then nodded and chuckled. Fine. Consider me meddling. From that day on, Ethan and I entered a cold war. A week later, I compromised. I planned to take the initiative to find him to make up and explain. The reason I was relieved to let that senior send me back was because he had the same sexual orientation as me. But when I arrived downstairs at his house, I just happened to see Arya stand on tiptoe and kiss his lips. The boy had his hands in his pockets and didn't show any intention of dodging. I was stunned. Unconsciously, I took a step back and kicked a flower pot. The sound was very loud. It attracted the attention of both of them. Sister. Arya blushed and stood there at a loss. Ethan just raised an eyebrow faintly. Looking for me? You too. I opened my dry lips and managed to make a sound after a long while. Arya hooked Ethan's hand. I'm with Ethan now. She smiled shyly. Sister, you are the first to know. Ethan knew that I liked him. Once before, I heard his conversation with a friend. Ethan, your childhood sweetheart, that Luna, does she like you? He laughed lazily. Yes. I knew it. The love in that girl's eyes when she looks at you couldn't be more obvious. Hey Ethan, then do you like her? Ethan just smiled and didn't answer. Now I already know his answer. Arya started dating Ethan openly. He blatantly shows his preference for her. When Arya and I were having lunch in the cafeteria, Ethan joined in halfway. Your hand. The boy lightly patted Arya's sticky hand stained with sauce. His tone was helpless and indulgent. Why did you get sauce all over your hands when peeling shrimps? Are you stupid? Arya pouted and muttered coquettishly. But I want to eat it. Ethan snorted. In this kind of situation, when you have a boyfriend, you can ask your boyfriend to do it. I lowered my head a bit more and lowered my eyes to hide my slightly reddened eyes. I ate more gently, hoping to finish eating quickly and not attract the attention of the two of them. But Arya was still the same as usual. Even though Ethan himself was in front of her, she still shared their daily love life without any scruples. Sister, Ethan is really super considerate. So this is what he is like when in love. Before, when I saw him interacting with you, it didn't seem gentle at all. I quickly adjusted my emotions and scooped the last mouthful of rice into my mouth. Because you are his girlfriend. As I said this casually, I stood up with my tray. Right. Arya seemed completely unaware, with an innocent smile on her lips. After all, you and Ethan are just friends. I forced a smile and left after saying, I'm done eating. Behind me were the clear voices of their casual conversation. Right, Ethan? Right. I only like you, okay, my ancestor? If you don't eat the shrimps, they will get cold. I unconsciously quickened my pace. Arya's probing words were extremely obvious. She had witnessed the close interaction between me and Ethan. Now doing these in front of me is just to prove how much Ethan likes her. Arya and I have our birthdays on the same day. I saw Ethan again on our birthday. He came to my house to pick up Arya to go out. Happy birthday. Ethan gently stroked her head. Just as I was about to leave quietly, I was stopped by Arya. Ethan, today is also my sister's birthday. You should also say happy birthday to her. I saw Ethan pause obviously. Apparently, he had forgotten. Then he looked at me with extremely complicated eyes. I couldn't help feeling embarrassed, and an awkward emotion spread. Don't involve me when you are in a relationship. I forced a helpless smile to cover up my embarrassment. Even though I had occasionally had fantasies before, perhaps Ethan was only with Arya to spite me on purpose. At this moment, I had to admit. He really fell in love with Arya. Arya has never let down her guard against me. When I went camping on the mountain with my friends, I got separated accidentally. Before I could find a way down the mountain, the sky suddenly became overcast. There was a sudden downpour, and there was no signal on my phone. But I remembered seeing a few households halfway up the mountain when I came. Just as I was about to walk towards the mountainside, Arya and Ethan found me. Sister. I heard a faint sound from afar and stopped in my tracks. Arya ran towards me, with Ethan following behind her. At a place 2 or 3 meters away from me, Arya fell. She sprained her left foot. Ethan and I arrived beside her at the same time. How are you, Arya? Ethan and I spoke at the same time. My foot hurts so much, Ethan. Arya's face was a mixture of tears and rain, looking embarrassed and pitiful. Ethan's eyes were filled with distress, and his voice softened. I'll carry you down the mountain. Be good and endure it. I helped Arya lie on Ethan's back. Be careful. As soon as I spoke, I was interrupted coldly by Ethan. He took 2 steps back while carrying Arya, his eyes impatient. Luna, can't you learn not to trouble others? If it weren't for you, would Arya be injured? I was stunned for a moment. Arya tugged at his sleeve from behind. Okay, don't say any more. I barely came to my senses and lowered my eyes. Sorry for making you worry. The way down the mountain was silent all the way. My calf was accidentally scratched when looking for a way out earlier. Blood was continuously seeping out. When Ethan sent Luna to the hospital, I just went to deal with my wound by the way. Sister, are you injured too? Arya looked at my calf. Ethan stopped holding Arya and looked back, following her line of sight. His face was even darker than before. "You don't know to say when you're injured?" As he said that, he approached me and was about to pick me up and put me in the car. I quietly dodged his hand. "It's just a small wound. It's nothing. Can't you be obedient, Luna? Let me see if there is any bacterial infection." Ethan seemed to have forgotten Arya's existence and squatted in front of me. "Really, it's not necessary." I avoided him. "I'll go wait for you in the car first." When I turned around, I just happened to see Arya's face without a trace of color. Perhaps it was from that moment on that, in order to prevent me from getting closer to Ethan, she became more and more distant from me. She even slandered me for bullying her. But this time I didn't intend to endure her. When I returned home with a swollen face, Arya was leaning on the railing on the second floor and drinking milk tea. When she looked at me, her innocent eyes blinked. Anger rose to the peak in an instant. I went upstairs and pulled her shoulder. I slapped her hard across the face without hesitation. "Didn't you say I asked someone to beat you?" I twitched my lips. If I don't make this accusation real, it would really be a pity for the slaps I endured. "Sister." As soon as Arya said a word, I slapped her again. Ethan arrived at my house before me. He came out of Arya's room and just saw this scene. Immediately, he pulled my hand away. "Luna." His voice was cold. "Don't force me to fight you." I sneered. Just as I was about to slap him back, he grabbed my wrist. I struggled desperately. Ethan's other hand also came to grab me. In the chaos, I was pushed from behind by a pair of hands. I rolled down the stairs in front. "Luna." Ethan growled. My head hit the protruding corner of the cabinet. My consciousness was hazy. Before losing consciousness completely, I saw the door at the entrance being opened. A familiar figure ran towards me. It seemed to be Sebastian, my stepbrother, who had been on a business trip for 2 months. When I woke up vaguely, it was already late. There were 2 people standing by the bed and talking. "There is a blood clot in the patient's brain. After waking up, there may be phenomena such as temporary amnesia." Okay. My eyelids were too heavy to open. I fell asleep again. The second time I should have slept for not long. When I woke up, the sky outside the window was still dark. A strange man was sitting by my bedside. "Does your head still hurt?" His voice was very gentle. I looked at him and shook my head. Then I realized later that I couldn't remember anything. So I had to ask this person in front of me directly. I seemed to have lost my memory. "Who are you, please?" There was no sign of surprise on his expression. Instead, there was a hint of a smile. The man's hand touched my lips and gently brushed them. "Your boyfriend." He knew I didn't believe him, so he handed me my phone. And sent me a WeChat message with his own phone. The note I gave him was: "Sebastian, why is our chat history blank?" "Because you are afraid that others will find out about our relationship and you delete it every time," Sebastian answered smoothly. I continued to look at my phone with suspicion. Looking back at the chat records with others before, I began to have a vague understanding of my identity. At the same time, I also learned that Sebastian was my stepbrother. I raised my head and looked at him doubtfully. "But aren't we nominally siblings?" He leaned closer to me, and his fingertip brushed my cheek. There was no sign of evasion in his eyes. "So we have been secretly." "Secretly what?" Sebastian's gaze shifted down as he spoke. "Secretly dating, secretly kissing, secretly doing." The door was suddenly pushed open and interrupted Sebastian's words. "Luna. There are photos of this person in my phone. It's Ethan. My younger sister Arya's boyfriend. Luna is not fully recovered yet. Can you please visit her later?" Sebastian's tone was very polite. But Ethan pretended not to hear and took a step closer to me. Sebastian's smile remained unchanged. In the next second, 2 bodyguards in suits walked into the ward. After looking at Sebastian, they directly dragged Ethan out. I inexplicably withdrew my gaze and focused on the problem in front of me. Looking at Sebastian again. "Are we really boyfriend and girlfriend?" "Of course. If you don't believe it, can we adapt slowly?" The man's voice was gentle. Luna, I will let you slowly remember the feeling of liking me. His slender hand gently held my cheek. I unconsciously rubbed against it. Okay. After being discharged from the hospital, Sebastian took me to his private villa. It was just near summer vacation. Sebastian simply asked for leave for me and I will take makeup exams when school starts. Getting off the car in the parking lot, Sebastian picked me up by the waist and got on the elevator. He looked down at me and spoke gently. Will it be uncomfortable for me to hold you like this? During my hospitalization, Sebastian's meticulous care had made me roughly desensitized to him. I felt my ears getting a little hot. No, brother. I answered in a low voice. The man smiled and held me up a bit more. With my chin on his shoulder, I felt inexplicably at ease. At the moment the elevator door closed, a hand blocked the elevator door. Luna. It was Ethan who had rushed over. The black hair on his forehead was slightly wet with sweat. You just agreed to live with him casually? There was a hint of anger in his eyes. I don't understand why my younger sister's boyfriend is always pestering me. But it's definitely not a good thing. Moreover, Sebastian showed me the surveillance footage at home. From that angle, it was him and my biological younger sister who pushed me downstairs. So when I looked at Ethan again, I unconsciously had a bit of hostility. Does it have anything to do with you? My biological father and stepmother are on vacation in the southern hemisphere. Sebastian is the only person who took care of me during my hospitalization. And naturally became the only person worthy of my trust after I lost my memory. Don't you really remember me? Ethan raised his hand and wanted to pull me. Obviously, you have always been closest to me. His dry and hoarse voice made him look a bit embarrassed. I didn't believe him at all. And strangely, I was instinctively repelled by this person. The hand on Sebastian's chest shrank. Brother. I frowned and looked at my boyfriend who hadn't said a word from the beginning. Why don't you drive him away? Let others pester your girlfriend. I pursed my lips and looked at him disapprovingly. You being like this makes me feel a bit useless. With my serious tone, I thought it would attract Sebastian's dissatisfaction. But he just chuckled, as if he agreed with me very much. My problem. He rubbed the back of my head and then pressed me into his arms. With darkness in front of my eyes, the sound by my ear became even clearer. Last time, didn't I say not to disturb her rest? Sebastian seemed to be asking gently. Ethan was naughty and said with a forced smile, Do I need you to tell me? You'd better put Luna down now. In the next second, through the gap, I saw Sebastian's bodyguards appear quietly again. One of them directly kicked Ethan to the ground and made him kneel in front of Sebastian. Ethan gritted his teeth. You son of a bitch, Sebastian covered the exposed ear of mine with his hand. But I could still vaguely hear. The man's tone was still gentle. But there was also a trace of unshakable calmness. He was like a noble person in a high position, judging the criminal very elegantly. I don't like others pestering Luna. Just like you surely don't want your sister in Burlington to disappear inexplicably, right? Ethan was instantly silenced. This is my last warning to you. Sebastian didn't wait for his answer and carried me into the elevator again. There were sounds of punching and kicking behind. Sebastian, your threat is useless to me. I will wait until the day Luna remembers. I will definitely get back together with her sooner or later. Don't forget, Luna who hasn't lost her memory doesn't like. I could only hear the following words intermittently. But before I could delve into these issues, another worrying matter was placed in front of me. It diverted my attention. Do we have to live together? I remembered what Sebastian said before and was hesitating on how to speak. He directly carried me into a room. You sleep here. As he said that, he put me by the bed. It was a very girly bedroom. He knew I still hadn't remembered, so he didn't force me to live with him. He really respected me so much. Looking at his back, my heart seemed to miss a beat. Sebastian remembered what I liked to eat, what I didn't like to eat, and what I was allergic to. He even remembered many of my small habits. I began to gradually believe that we used to be lovers. The main reason was that I found that I really started to like him a little bit. Sebastian was too busy. But even if he was very busy, he would still find time to take me out to relax and go home to have meals with me. Then he would work overtime in his study in the middle of the night. I always felt that I should do something for him. So, according to the recipe on the pad, I learned to stew soup for Sebastian. When I was concentrating on adding salt, a pair of hands encircled my waist. "Are you stewing soup?" The man's breath sprayed by my ear. "Yes." There was a trace of warmth by my ear. "For whom are you stewing?" I thought he was asking knowingly. But I still answered seriously, "For brother." "So good." He wrapped me from behind. His lips seemed to be close to my auricle, about to kiss but not yet. "Will you be uncomfortable being hugged like this?" "No. Actually, I wanted to say that it seemed that I had already gotten used to any way you hugged me." Sebastian stopped there that day. I didn't expect that our next step would be initiated by me. That day was the first rainy day since I lost my memory. The cold wind at night accompanied by bursts of thunder made me a little scared. Wearing a nightgown, I knocked on Sebastian's room. "What's wrong?" I raised my head, a little shy. "Brother, can I sleep with you? I'm a little scared." Sebastian looked down at me and didn't answer immediately. I was a little embarrassed. Weren't we lovers? Was this proposal so difficult for him to decide? Obviously, he said something about secretly doing. When I was getting deeper and deeper into my own world, I was suddenly picked up by a pair of hands around my waist. I was picked up by Sebastian face to face and sat in his arms. "Yes." He looked into my eyes and spoke slowly. When I saw that there was almost a person's distance between me and Sebastian, I couldn't help being puzzled. My boyfriend seemed a bit too gentlemanly. When I saw that there was almost a person's distance between me and Sebastian, I couldn't help being puzzled. "Don't be afraid." The man's hand stroked my back. "I'm here. Don't be afraid, okay?" His voice was by my ear, and the distance suddenly closed. I raised my head from his arms, and some heat rose on my face. "Are we really lovers? If it's true, why haven't you kissed me yet?" Sebastian pressed my back towards him. He pinched my chin and lifted it, forcing me to meet his gaze. "Want a kiss?" I pursed my lips and didn't answer. This question was too straightforward. Sebastian's fingertip stroked my lower lip. "Have you fallen in love with brother?" I thought for a while and nodded slightly. "I think I like you." The man smiled and kissed me slowly. At first, he just stroked and nibbled on my lips, until I couldn't help but let out a sound. Then my teeth were pried open, sweeping away the air in my mouth. I didn't know when he had already turned over. I was held down by my wrists, intimately interlocking fingers. The man looked down at me from above. "Luna." "Yes." His other hand was already stroking the edge of my hem. "About to enter but not yet. Do you want to take the next step?" "What's the next step?" I didn't react and was still breathing slightly. The man's fingertip had already reached into my hem and was stroking my waist. There was desire in his eyes. Sebastian leaned down and deliberately let me feel it. "This is the next step. This is probably the hottest place on this bed, even through 2 layers of fabric. Are you afraid?" Sebastian took my earlobe in his mouth. I trembled subconsciously. I was slow to organize my words. Fortunately, Sebastian didn't embarrass me and quickly pulled away. "You sleep first." He touched my head and went straight into the bathroom. I lost my memory, not being stupid. Separated by a door, I knew what he was doing. The sound from the bathroom stimulated my eardrums and made me even more awake. Until Sebastian lay down with a coolness all over his body, I still didn't feel sleepy at all. "Brother." I was a little embarrassed, but still moved closer. "Can we kiss for a while longer?" I asked him with a blushing face. Sebastian tilted his head and raised an eyebrow slightly. I thought his kisses were so comfortable, like teasing a peeled lychee between the lips. "How to kiss?" He approached quietly. "Like just now?" I endured the shyness that made me want to hide under the quilt and nodded. Sebastian supported himself on both sides of my head with his hands and leaned down to kiss me lightly. "Not like this." I was a little anxious. He kissed the corners of my mouth densely, and his voice was by my lips. Then what's it like, Luna? You show it to brother. I knew he was doing it on purpose. But the man's coaxing tone made me a little dizzy in the already ambiguous atmosphere. I strangely put my hands around his neck. Slightly upward, looking for his lips. Just like he did just now. Open my mouth and pry open his teeth. When I was still not satisfied, Sebastian let me go again. Luna. The man's breath was a bit heavy. I stared at his lips. And leaned over again. You should sleep now. Sebastian separated my kiss and put his hand on my shoulder to stop my movement. I pursed my lips and replied in a low voice, okay. I didn't insist anymore. Otherwise, he would go into the bathroom for the third time tonight. That day was the first time I saw Arya after I woke up. Although I knew it was her who pushed me down. But my injuries hadn't fully recovered yet. Worried that my combat effectiveness wasn't enough. So I didn't rush to settle accounts with her. Unexpectedly, she took the initiative to come to me first. At that time, I was struggling to climb onto Sebastian's lap and straddle him. Brother. I pulled away his pad and threw it aside. We haven't kissed today. I seriously reminded him to fulfill his lover's obligation. Not because I really wanted to kiss him very much. Sebastian leaned on the sofa, with a hint of laziness between his eyebrows and eyes. Do it yourself. His hand was just on my waist. There was no intention of taking the initiative to kiss me at all. Okay. I was reluctant for only a second, then leaned down and bit his lips. Be gentle, okay? I retreated a little bit and looked at him apologetically. Did I hurt you? There was an almost imperceptible smile on the man's lips. His hand slid to my back and suddenly pressed. I fell on his chest unexpectedly. A little bit. He said that I apologized to him, and then put my hands on his shoulders, gently approaching his lips. Luna. A sharp female voice interrupted this kiss. I looked in the direction of the sound. Arya was standing in front of the window, looking furious. Just right, I also wanted to see her. Sister, can you explain to me why you are living with brother Sebastian? Arya took a step closer to me, seemingly suppressing her anger. I remember you used to avoid him. Why are you living with him now? I was puzzled. Because he is my boyfriend. That's him lying to you. Arya sneered. You didn't like him at all before. At this point, I still didn't understand the reason why she was trying so hard to clear the relationship between me and Sebastian. I looked back at Sebastian. He was just sitting on the sofa, looking at me calmly. I turned my gaze to Arya again and got back to the main issue. This is none of your business. I just want to ask you, what kind of mentality did you have to push your own sister downstairs? She had a pale face and looked at me resentfully. Her lower lip was almost bitten through. Are you still going to settle accounts with me? Aren't you satisfied yet, sister? The moment she looked at Sebastian, tears suddenly fell. Didn't brother Sebastian get the school to cancel my competition qualification for you? During the entire university period, I am not allowed to participate in any competition. The piano that I have been practicing hard for so many years is wasted like this. I blinked. So Sebastian has already taken revenge for me. Arya walked up to Sebastian, holding back her tears. I have known you as long as my sister has known you. Why? Why do you favor my sister? I paused and completely understood. Arya seemed to have special feelings for Sebastian. Then what about Ethan? When I was still struggling with this complicated love quadrangle, I saw my good sister reaching out to pull my boyfriend. I immediately stepped forward and opened her hand. Don't you have your own boyfriend? Why are you flirting with someone else's boyfriend? Then I glared at Sebastian. Why didn't you dodge? But he just looked at me without any emotion. Without blinking. I decided to solve the immediate trouble first. Arya, don't feel so wrong just because you are suspended. I was pushed downstairs by you and was hospitalized for more than a month. Aren't you still standing here fine? I will settle this with you slowly. She gave a bleak smile. Isn't it just a matter of one word for you to deal with me? Anyway, he is willing to do anything for you. Arya looked at Sebastian, seeming to be expecting him to look at her. But when I looked over following her gaze, Sebastian's eyes were still on me. She seemed to have given up on herself. She left with a self-mocking smile. Don't you have anything to explain? There were only the two of us in the room again. I started to settle accounts with Sebastian after autumn. The man was still calm, but he lowered his eyes and didn't look at me anymore. He had his usual idle smile. What she said is right. I lied to you. Before you lost your memory, you didn't like me at all. I looked at him quietly. Suddenly, I saw the loss hidden under his casual tone. He didn't even urge me to respond to his words. It seemed that he didn't have any expectations for me at all. Before, he would only take the initiative to hug me. Even kissing was brought up by me. And the sudden stop that night also had an answer. Sebastian didn't not want to. He was just afraid that if I regained my memory one day, I would hate him. The increasingly oppressive atmosphere in the room was broken by my soft snort. Let's put this aside first. Please explain another more important thing to me first. I forced a stiff smile and my voice was cold. Why didn't you dodge when Arya pulled you just now? Whose boyfriend is so lacking in boundaries? He slightly raised his eyes and looked at me calmly. After a long time, the breeze slipping in through the gap in the window dissipated the gloom in the man's eyes. Come here. I walked in front of him with the intention of having a serious discussion. Before I could speak, I was pulled into his arms. Sebastian's slightly hoarse voice sounded by my ear. Well, it's my fault. He hugged me tighter. I promise she won't touch me again. Can you forgive me? I rubbed against his neck and hugged him back. With the lower half of my face buried at his collarbone, my voice was muffled. Don't do it again. I will be jealous. He still hugged me silently. I slightly turned my head and kissed his cheek. Brother, liking is a feeling, not a memory. Even if I remember everything, I won't stop liking you. Don't worry. I patted his back gently to soothe him. Sebastian chuckled. He picked me up and pressed me into the sofa, continuing what was interrupted by Arya. During the intertwined kisses, his hand held my neck and pressed me towards him. The kiss also had a tendency to move down. Do you want to take the next step, Luna? I put my hands around his neck and leaned close to his ear. I softly refuted. Obviously you want to. The man paused in kissing my neck. He smiled faintly. I want to. In the next second, I was picked up from the sofa and walked towards the bedroom. Daytime plus first experience. Double buffs really make me have nowhere to hide. I closed my eyes tightly and didn't dare to look at the person hovering above. Open your eyes, Luna. He always has a way to force me to listen to him. If I don't open my eyes soon, I will be unable to hold back and make a sound. When our eyes meet, desire surges. Sebastian presses my chin, forcing me to open my mouth to accept his kiss. This is something more interesting than kissing. There are fine beads of sweat on his shoulders. Don't you like it, Luna? I am already in a daze. Like a driftwood floating on the sea, swaying and undulating. Occasionally, it seems to be slapped by gentle waves. But most of the time, it is more like the ferocity when hitting a reef. The weak driftwood board shuttles among the reefs, colliding from one reef to another. The only thing that remains unchanged is the strength. At this time, competing with Sebastian is not beneficial. So, I force myself to answer with strength. Like. As soon as I finished speaking, I felt that after a burst of rapid turbulence, I was let go. I was rushed to the shore by the rapids, lying limply in peace. And I expressed that as a driftwood, I don't want to go into the sea again. But obviously, Sebastian doesn't think so. He seems to have explored a new world. After trying in multiple directions, he also wants to explore different places. For example, the balcony, the kitchen counter, and the car in the parking garage. Sebastian, let me go. I leaned weakly in his arms. Call me what? His hand teases my earlobe playfully. Brother. Sebastian's hand returns to my shoulder. I breathed a sigh of relief. Arya and Ethan broke up. As the blood clot in my brain dissipates, I start to slowly remember things from before. When I heard this news, I wasn't surprised at all. For Arya, my biological younger sister, I see her very clearly. After she was born, our parents became busier at work, receiving too little care. Coupled with the divorce of our parents just when she was taking the high school entrance examination, she suffered double pressure. Lack of love and abnormal competitiveness have created her today. Arya has never liked Ethan from the beginning to the end. The person she has a crush on has always been Sebastian. Late that night, I received a call from Arya. "Sister, why does everyone like you?" She choked and expressed her grievance. Being with Ethan was also her way of conveying a message to me. So what if he is your best childhood friend? He still likes me. Arya subconsciously regards me as the biggest comparison object and competitor. The sense of insecurity she has towards Ethan is not because of jealousy. It's just that she simply doesn't want to see Ethan being better to me than to her. Generally speaking, she hopes that everyone in the world likes her the most. Sebastian liking me was completely unexpected to her. The person she has a crush on likes her competitor. This is a huge blow to her. She knows herself well and never thought of confessing to Sebastian. But I am directly with him. Brother Sebastian. When Arya was drunk and making a phone call to Sebastian, I was sitting in his arms, playing Angry Birds with his phone. Seeing Arya's call, I simply pressed answer. "Do you only see sister? Tell me, where am I worse than her?" On the other end of the phone, the girl complained mournfully. But on this end, Sebastian didn't listen at all. While kissing down from my ear, he reached out to open the drawer of the bedside table. "There are still 3. He smiled and gently bit my ear, his breathy voice full of ambiguity. "Enough." But this time I entered the state more slowly. I pushed away Sebastian's hand and sneered into the receiver. "Arya, taking your own sister as a competitor in female rivalry. You are really something." The other end was instantly silent. I was so angry at this sister with distorted values that I was about to give a 3,000-word lecture. Sebastian was already impatient. "Finished?" He took the phone, hung up, and threw it aside. "Luna, save me first, okay? The fire is on the verge of breaking out. The raging flames spreading in the mountains urgently need an artificial rain to put out. Until the rain stops, the mountains regain their vitality. Only the person who brings the rain is exhausted." Early the next morning, before I had slept for a few hours, I received a call from the hospital. "Arya got drunk and drove into a tree by the side of the road last night. Not only was her driver's license revoked, but her right leg will probably need to be in a cast for a while. I can't let go of everything Arya has done to me. But asking me to push her down the stairs myself, I can only say that I am not as cold-blooded as her. This car accident is also a lesson for her." Later, I went to the hospital to see Arya. Her eyes were clearer than before and she didn't mention Sebastian again. But what she said was very pale. "Sorry, sister." I couldn't say the words "it's okay" to her, so I remained silent. Before leaving, she suddenly mentioned Ethan. "Sister, can't you see? Ethan likes you." I didn't take her words to heart. Until I saw Ethan again. Sebastian was invited to support a newly opened private shooting range of a certain young master. "I want to go too. Will you teach me how to shoot?" I excitedly shook Sebastian's sleeve. If I had known that Ethan would also appear there, not only would I not go myself, I also wouldn't let Sebastian go and make himself uncomfortable. When we arrived, there were already quite a few people in the venue. Basically, everyone who saw Sebastian would come up and greet and chat for a few words. Only the boy wearing soundproof earmuffs not far away. "Sebastian, have a match?" Sebastian looked down at me. I nodded vigorously. "I haven't seen you shoot yet." He raised an eyebrow slightly and agreed. After putting on the equipment, Sebastian raised his hand and aimed. Everyone consciously became quiet and held their breath and waited. Bang! A bullet hole appeared on the target. Only 6 rings. Sebastian put down his hand with a smile and played with the gun casually. "Sorry, Mr. Sebastian." Ethan walked in from the outside and apologized insincerely. I slipped my hand and hit your target. After saying that, his gaze swept over Sebastian and finally fell on me. Sebastian hadn't had a chance to shoot yet. The 6 rings just now were shot by Ethan, deliberately embarrassing Sebastian. Quick! Apologize to Mr. Sebastian quickly. Someone reminded Ethan. In high society, class distinctions are more obvious. Sebastian is at the top. And Ethan is just barely squeezing into this circle. Sebastian took off his headphones and walked to the sofa next to me and sat down. Ethan didn't move either. The situation gradually became stalemated. I was just unintentional. Mr. Sebastian won't mind such a small matter, right? Ethan leaned against the fence obliquely and forced a smile. Sebastian didn't answer. Rarely, he lit a cigarette and held it between his fingers. He took a light puff and then spoke with a smile. You didn't take my warning seriously. Ethan snorted. My sister is back in the country. What are you going to threaten me with this time? Tell me and let me hear. Sebastian seemed to be laughing at the naivety of this young man. He tapped the ash off and his gaze casually fell on the marble ashtray. Why should I threaten you? Ethan slowly restrained his smile, as if not understanding Sebastian's composure. After Sebastian stubbed out the remaining half of the cigarette, he slowly spoke. Press his head on the target. He didn't even specify who should do it, and someone took the initiative to walk towards Ethan. There are many of Ethan's friends among this group. But no one dares to offend Sebastian. Everyone's stance is very obvious. Outnumbered, Ethan was quickly forced to be pressed against the target. Sebastian, what do you mean? Use my head as a target? He provocatively said viciously, if you have the guts, shoot at my head. As soon as he finished speaking, there were bursts of mocking laughter around. Clearly mocking Ethan's overestimation of his own abilities. Brother? I was a little unfamiliar with Sebastian like this. I tugged at his sleeve and called him in a low voice. Sebastian put on the headphones for me. Brother will teach you how to shoot. He took me over, put the shooting pistol in my hand, holding my hand from behind, raising it, aiming at Ethan's brow. I couldn't help trembling. The man's lips were almost against my ear. He chuckled. Don't be afraid. Ethan on the opposite side changed from his initial unruly clamoring to silent nervousness now. The face slapping was quick. Sebastian didn't rush to pull the trigger. He just looked at Ethan again. Repeat your last sentence just now. Ethan pursed his lips and remained silent. It was an obvious sign of being scared but not admitting defeat. Sebastian's smile remained unchanged. Suddenly, he pressed my hand and fired a shot at his head. The bullet grazed his hair and shot through the target. I said, repeat it again. Sebastian took the gun from my hand and pointed it directly at Ethan. Gently reminded him again. The boy on the opposite side who was being pressed and unable to move was just barely coming to his senses after being startled by that shot. Cold sweat flowed down from his temple. He pursed his lips tightly. After a long while, he reluctantly admitted defeat and spoke. If you have the guts, shoot at me, at my head. Very good. Sebastian fired 2 shots in a row. The bullets passed by his cheek. Ethan didn't say a word, but his pale face proved that he was terrified. When the people pressing him suddenly withdrew, he staggered. It was a sign of weak legs. Even though he knew that Sebastian wouldn't really shoot at him, he was also afraid that a passing bullet might accidentally hit him. Thinking of ways to hold others' weaknesses and then threaten them is a treatment only for opponents of the same level. But for Ethan, for Sebastian, it is easy for him to step on him. He has absolute ability. As it got late, the young master who organized the gathering had arranged a hotel for rest. I thought that after such humiliation, Ethan had already left here. But not only did he stay, but he was also in the room next to ours. Were you afraid of that shot today? Sebastian sat by the bed and played with my hand. I immediately knelt up and moved closer to him. Not afraid. I know you were just scaring Ethan. It's not a real bullet. He deserved it. I remember he seemed to have bullied me before. In my gradually recovering memory, Ethan seemed to have had someone slap me. I just think it's so exciting. I was a little unfinished. Sebastian pinched my fingertip and there was a hint of a smile on his lips. Like excitement? I immediately nodded. Just as I was about to ask him to continue teaching me shooting tomorrow, the man picked up the just untied tie and wrapped it around my hand circle by circle. Me? Question mark. He slowly tied my wrists. Don't you like excitement? I didn't mean this. Because I was afraid that the hotel room was not soundproof, I tightened my teeth tightly in the first half. Sebastian noticed and reached out to pinch my chin and press down. I immediately widened my eyes. Make a sound, Luna. Of course, this is his gentle side and he is still willing to discuss with me. In this regard, he has many ways to make me speak. When I was praying that the room must be soundproof while floating and sinking, there was a knock on the door. I was tense all over. This also caused Sebastian to hiss softly. Hello, some other guests have reported to us that you seem to have disturbed the rest of other guests. Please. I don't know how the hotel service staff said this without any fluctuation. But Sebastian was not embarrassed at all. Instead, he interrupted the person outside. Whoever was disturbed, let him come and tell me himself. After saying that, he ignored the people outside the door and focused on me again. Relax. He patted me suggestively. The person who complained about us is undoubtedly Ethan. According to his temperament, he would have kicked the door long ago. But today, Sebastian just punished him. He didn't have the guts to make trouble, so he had to change a method to show his dissatisfaction. High-intensity exercise is very exhausting. When Sebastian went into the bathroom again, I changed my clothes and went to the 24-hour convenience store on the next floor to buy some snacks. Luna. I paused and looked back at Ethan warily. He twitched his lips. It's really hard to see you. Sebastian watches you too closely. Do you have anything to do? My waist was so sore that I couldn't stand for long. I didn't have the ability to chat. I know it seems that it's too late to say anything now. You have fallen in love with Sebastian. Even if I want to help you remember the past, you don't believe me. He looked tired and his eyes were dim. It seemed that since I woke up, this boy in front of me had become more and more embarrassed every time. Completely losing his high-spirited appearance before. I remembered a lot. Ethan's eyes lit up. Really? Then did you remember that we were once the closest childhood sweethearts? I looked at him quietly and shook my head. I remember the person you like is Arya. You are very good to her. You peel shrimps for her and take her out for her birthday. I also remember that you had someone slap me for her, right? There was panic in his eyes. He opened his mouth as if he wanted to explain something. But he couldn't find a way to start. Arya said you like me. I looked at him in confusion. Ethan even felt that his love was not worthy to be shown. After a long time, he gently uttered a sound, but if you like me, why don't you remember my birthday? And find someone to beat me? This is not reasonable. Ethan gave a self-deprecating smile. Yes, I am a jerk. Luna, I know you don't believe me, but I really have always liked you. For your sister, at first I was with her indeed despite you. But she looks like you but has a completely opposite personality. It's like seeing another you. I unconsciously liked her for a while. But when you fell down the stairs, I realized belatedly that you are the most important to me. Although everything Sebastian did in the afternoon was already very satisfying, after hearing these words, I still couldn't help but slap him again. You are so despicable. He didn't move and let me hit him, but the hand that touched him felt a little uncomfortable. Luna, I'll let you slap me back one slap at a time. Will you forgive me? After saying that, he was about to reach out to take my hand and slap him in the face. The first half of the proposal is good. Sebastian didn't know when he appeared. The bodyguard beside him stopped Ethan's movement. This is what you asked for. There was a satisfied smile in Sebastian's eyes. Before Ethan could react, he was slapped hard by the bodyguard who is over 1.8 m and weighs around 160 or 70 kilograms. The slap from him is much stronger than mine. Ouch, it looks so painful. I blinked and withdrew my gaze. The man in front of me didn't even dry his hair, the black hair on his forehead was slightly wet. It was exactly the same as an hour ago when he was acting fiercely and there was a slight sweat on his forehead. "Brother, my waist is sore. Can you carry me back?" I stretched out my hands towards him. He gently asked in return, "If your waist is sore, can you still stand and chat for so long?" Okay, I was implicated by Ethan. Just as my stiffened hands were about to be withdrawn, Sebastian picked me up. It was the same posture as sitting in his arms. I put my hands around his neck and explained seriously. He stopped me and wouldn't let me leave. "I'm not lying to you. My waist is really very sore. If you still want to do something, it will break." Sebastian didn't listen to my threat at all. He proved with his actions that my waist was indeed not broken. "Didn't you buy snacks when you went downstairs just now?" The lights in front of me swayed. I nodded instinctively. There was a rustling sound by my ear. Immediately after, I was picked up and sat down. "Aren't you hungry?" Sebastian tore off a little bread and fed it to me. Feeding me now is telling me in a disguised way that there is still a long way to go later and I need to replenish my strength? I opened my mouth and ate it. At this moment, my hatred for Ethan reached its peak. "Luna." I felt Sebastian was looking at me. But I was so tired that I didn't even want to lift my eyelids. "You are so good at eating," he commented in a low voice. Because of Sebastian's influence during this period, I almost immediately realized that he might have another meaning. Chewing the bread in my mouth, in boredom, I remembered some things again. At the age of 17, Ethan and I had an argument by the side of the road. The sun had already set. He ignored me and left on his motorcycle wearing a helmet. I was walking alone by the road in the suburbs. There was not even a car to hail nearby. Arya was still at school. I could only call Sebastian. "Brother, can you send someone to pick me up?" I politely asked this not very familiar stepbrother. "Are you alone?" "Yes." "Send me your location." "Okay, thank you, brother." Half an hour later, a black car stopped in front of me. But it was Sebastian who got out of the car. I didn't expect him to come in person. After all, my stepmother who is an ABC always talks about how busy Sebastian is. At that time, just like now, it was early spring. The chilly wind still carried a strong coldness. Probably because I had been blown by the wind for too long. Not long after sitting in the passenger seat, my head became dizzy. I fell asleep in a daze. Later, Sebastian stopped the car and carried me out from the passenger seat. I couldn't open my eyes at all, and my voice was also unclear. "Thank you, brother." "Well, you continue to sleep." "Oh." Before I finished speaking, I fell asleep again. That wasn't the first time Sebastian had cleaned up after me. I think everyone's love is traceable. Even the most reserved Sebastian. I slowly came to my senses. I raised my hand to hug the man's shoulder above. "Sebastian." "I love you." He bit my earlobe. "Me too." A thrilling curtain call. At this moment, I suddenly felt that this amnesia was not all bad. That day when I woke up on the hospital bed. On an early spring night, I heard the first lie. "I am your boyfriend." My believing it was the beginning of this story. The end.